YouTube. Today in the Naughty Librarian, we are going over my mid-November wrap-up. Okay, so I have been a little reading machine this month. I was trying to get as many books done before the holidays as I could because Thanksgiving is coming up and family and cooking, and it's just gonna be a hot mess. So I want to have as many books read before then as possible. So I actually managed to squeeze in 8 books in the first half of this month. I am a champion. However, before we get into the books I read, I got a quick unboxing to do. I partnered with this company called Imposia. Imposia is like a bookish blanket company, and their blankets are legitimately so cool. Oh my gosh, let's unbox this. Okay, so here it is. I realize this is probably not very clear, so I am going to put in a little insert photo of the whole blanket, but the cool thing about this blanket, you guys, you don't even know yet. You don't even know. It's got a hood. It's a hooded blanket, everybody. I mean, eventually Los Angeles will get cool enough that I will need a hooded blanket. Right now, it's still a little warm. I believe it was 85 degrees today. So, I mean, there's that. But as you can see, it is a hooded blanket. It has a little button, and I love that because so often I grab a blanket and I try to like wrap it around myself and then try to do things, and I just feel like I'm like the evil queen in Snow White with her little like witchy hand like, do you want an apple? And I feel weird. But this way, you guys, it's a cape. It is a blanket cape, and I am a superhero of bookish goodness. So it is super soft and is really thick and high quality, and like the inside is like this like cool fleecy material. And this one in particular, it has a stag on it, and I was like, okay, stags are kind of like fantasy goals. It reminds me of so many different series, like the Grishaverse that has a stag in it. There's the Throne of Glass series has a stag in it. I mean, freaking Harry Potter. I mean, stags are all over the place. So I saw this one and I was like, yes, that's the one. But the reason I am bringing up this blanket in particular in this video is because they're actually running a giveaway right now, and there's still a few more days to enter. So in the blibbity blue down below, I'm gonna have a link to the giveaway. It ends on November 22nd, and there will be 8 winners because there's 8 different patterns to choose from. So go over there, check it out, sign up, and maybe you can win one of these awesome guys. And also, they're going to be restocking their store soon. Once I get the dates on that, I will share that with you. But in the meantime, they're running an awesome giveaway, and you could win one of these really cool blankets, and it'll totally arrive in time for Christmas. So hey, just letting you know. But without further ado, let's get into the books I read in November. First category is deeply unsettling, and I read 5 books that were deeply unsettling. First up, I read You by Caroline Kepnes, and yes, I know there is a Netflix show, and no, I have not watched it because I really suck at watching things, but I did want to read the book because the concept sounded really, really cool. Also, it's written in second person, which I was fascinated by because I don't really read a lot of things that happen in second person, so I was like, okay, what's this about? And from page 1, it is deeply unsettling. It is like just off, you know what I mean? This book is about Joe, and he considers himself a romantic, but in all reality, he is a psychopath. So we're in his mind, and he is telling the story to you, which is Beck, his object of affection. So he's kind of telling the story to you, and it puts you in the story, and you're like, oh no, I don't want to be in this story. This story is creepy, but you're in it. So you feel like deeply unsettled the whole time. And the thing about this story in particular that like gets me is that, like, on the one hand, yes, it is deeply unsettling and demented, but on the other hand, Joe is strangely charming at times. In his own twisted way, what he's doing is romantic, and you're like, you know, if this was a rom-com and this were told for laughs, like, maybe this would play. So that's kind of how I feel about this. Like, it's really demented yet charming. So it's kind of like if a rom-com was told as a horror story. And I tweeted that, and then Caroline Kepnes retweeted it. So I'm like, nailed it. But whoo, man, I really, really like this. I gave it 4.5 stars. I couldn't give it 5 because it wasn't like, wow, this rocked my socks off. I have never said that before in my life. Seriously, I've never said rocked my socks off, but I felt like I should swear less in life, so like, I did. Moving on, I really, really like this. It just wasn't like that 5-star incredible, but it was close. So I gave 4.5 stars. So good, genuinely. It's so creepy. Oh my gosh, if you want to just be creeped out and oddly charmed at the same time, then read this. It's gonna give you all of that. It's, I don't know, it's kind of an unreliable, unlikable hero that is so charming that you kind of root for them anyway, even though they're doing horrible things. It kind of gives me like a Dexter vibe, I guess, if you know that show. I think there was also a book series about Dexter where he's not the good guy of the story. He's kind of a bad guy, but he's so charming that you're like, well. Same thing with Joe. He's oddly charming and he's charismatic, but he's also like demented. So I don't know how to explain him besides that. He's just like oddly charming but demented. Best way to describe this book and the main character, Joe. Also, let's just talk about Beck for a minute. Beck is a girl who is like the object of his desire, and I like that she didn't just paint Beck as this damsel in distress who has been put into this situation beyond her control. It's like, Beck is a hot mess beyond just being in your early 20s, because everyone in the early 20s is a hot mess. Don't try to tell me otherwise. We all know it's true. So, but she goes beyond that. She is so unlikable of a victim that you don't necessarily feel bad for her in the end. It's hard to describe, because obviously, like, no, she doesn't deserve this behavior, but like I don't know, neither of them are likable people. They're both fucked up and weird and demented, and maybe they deserve each other. I don't know. It's oddly charming yet demented. Bottom line, I really like this. I recommend. Next book I read was Imaginary Friend by Chbosky, and whew, this was a monster book. It is 700 pages. Like, oh, like this took some like endurance to get through, but it's very good. It's kind of told in this cinematic way where you feel like, okay, so that's where the episode would end, and this is where the new episode begins. It's very, I don't know, it feels like a 10-episode like Netflix series, honestly, the way it's written. So go into it thinking that, and I feel like the page number won't be as daunting as going in, this is 700 pages. It's like, oh no, it's like 10 episodes. It feels more palatable that way. Whatever. That has nothing to do with the plot though, however. Imaginary Friend is about this kid, and his name is Christopher and his mom, Kate. They are running away from an abusive relationship, and they wind up in this small town, and they're very much, you know, like a mother and a son who are like root for each other, they're there for each other. It's all kind of very saccharine, but in a way that you're just like heart-warmed by it. And essentially, one day, Christopher goes into the woods, the creepy-ass woods, and he's not seen again for 6 days. So some shit goes down in the woods. And he comes back, and he's just not the same anymore. Like, for example, like, Christopher obviously has dyslexia. He comes back, and all of a sudden, he's, like, genius-level intelligent. Like, there's been changes to Christopher. And it's kind of a mystery/horror story about what happened in the woods and how it's affecting everything else in town. And I definitely recommend this if you were a fan of the following 3 things. If you were a fan of Stephen King's It, Stranger Things on Netflix, and you're not off-put by Catholicism, then you will really, really enjoy this. It does take a turn that I wasn't expecting necessarily, because I do feel like this is more Catholic-based horror, I would say, because a lot of the characters in this are Catholic, and that kind of makes sense for the geographic location this takes in. It's a small town in Pennsylvania. A lot of those are known for being heavily Catholic. And it's very much, you know, heaven and hell are boring. It's like a biblical proportions horror story. So it gets horrifying at points because we're literally dealing with hell. So it gets fucked up. And I did end up giving this 4 stars in the end. And I'll explain why. I couldn't give it 5 stars because, remember where I said it was saccharine? That kind of comes up a lot in the book. A lot of these characters and tropes and even the dialogue are very cliched. However, they're cliches because they effing work. You know what I mean? Like Stranger Things, for example, because I know a lot of people have seen that. it is full of cliches, but like they're so well done that you don't mind and you still root for these characters because they get under your skin and they're in your heart. Same thing here, you know, they're cliche tropes and dialogue, but they work for a reason. So you just go with it, and I enjoyed that. It made me very endeared to these characters, and I wanted like all of the good things for them. Also, the kids in this story are supposed to be about 7 or 8 years old, and 7 or 8 year olds are not this complex, I don't think. Like, I would say if these characters were like 10 or 11, I'd buy it, but not 7. Like, they're much more mature in dealing with situations. Not that 7-year-olds don't deal with these situations, but the way they respond to them is not 7. Like, I feel like these are older children than they are. They really don't come across as 7 years old. If you've read this, you kind of understand what I'm saying. Like, they have foul mouths and they are violent. So I'm like, I don't think 7 is old enough to like have that kind of vocabulary yet, but I don't know. And also, it is excessively long. Like, it is 700 pages. It doesn't necessarily need to be 700 pages. Did I enjoy the 700 pages? Yes. So it's kind of that weird toss-up where it's like, if you're willing to put in the work to finish it, you'll probably have a good time. However, positives on this. It is legit terrifying. Like, it is a scary book. I mentioned Stephen King's It for a reason. It's scary. This is Stephen King type horror. So if you are sensitive to graphic violence, like I said, this is heaven and hell, biblical proportions horror. So you're literally dealing with hell. You can just imagine the demented things that are happening in this book. And I mean, okay, like, I'm just gonna say it. Like, I mentioned the kid's name is Christopher, and he's kind of the Christ-like figure in this book, and it's just like, that's a little on the nose, okay? So there's a lot of little things that are like, eye-rolly, but in the end, it's a damn good horror story. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was scary. The imagery is very cinematic. You'll be reading it, and you can picture it in your head. Because I almost feel like it's like shot for shot, like how we would like aim the camera at this angle and then go to this angle. It feels very cinematic, like you're watching it. So it has that going for it. The imagery is demented and scary. It's very well written, even if it is kind of saccharine and cliched at points. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't care by the end of it. I was like, yeah, you know what? It's like a strong mom and her son against the world. We've seen it before, but it doesn't matter because it works, you know, that kind of thing. So yes, I do recommend, but just be aware going in, it is demented and horrifying and awesome. I also read Teeth in the Mist by Don Kurtagich, and this had been like, so many times people have recommended this to me, so many times, and I was like, all right, let's do this. I'm in my spooky book mode. And this one is also kind of going into demons, and this one is a bit more Faustian in proportion. It's, yeah, you know what, there you go, it's a Faust story. I'm just gonna say it, it's a story involving Faust. And, you know, making deals with demons, curses, all that jazz, and it has kind of like witchcraft in it, and overall, it's getting a lot of points for style. Like, I didn't know this going in, but the book is very visual. Like, I'll try to find like a picture real quick. Like, for example, like there's pictures in it and stuff, and like the way it's written, it's kind of like all over the page sometimes when there's like whispers and stuff. It's a very visual book. And I did listen to this on audio, so at times I had to like pause the audiobook and go back and look at the book and make sure I didn't miss any pictures. But I do kind of recommend listening and reading at the same time, because the audiobook has like sound effects and all this stuff, so it was a very immersive experience. Do I think it's the best thing I've ever read? No, I gave it 3.5 stars because it was very good but not excellent. It's mainly told through 2 time periods. There's this time in the 1800s and there's a modern day story. And I don't necessarily know what the modern day element added to the story. Like, in the end, like, it became apparent, but like it doesn't help throughout the book when we keep stopping the main action of the story, which is in the 1800s, to go to the modern day, which isn't helping. It felt like 2 different books almost. So I think that was a contributing factor why it took down my rating of it. It was just like 2 different stories going on at the same time that are related, but are so different from each other that it didn't work, but sufficiently creepy and demon-ridden. So it has that going for it. It's very stylish. It has lots of art in there. It's very, I don't know, immersive. So I do recommend the audiobook too. So for that, style and production, A+. It's doing great. It's just like, it could have been better. And a part of this is just my own personal taste as well, because I want to like Faust. I just don't. And it's because I've had to read it so many times. For so many different assignments when I was in school, it kept getting Faust assigned to me. And it's like, I've read it. Fuck. I have read many different renditions of Faust. Like, I've read a lot of them and I'm tired of it. So this is kind of a me problem. But I went with it because I do like the demon imagery, and she kind of tapped into that in a good way, where it felt sufficiently creepy. You know what I mean? It felt demony and witchcrafty, and I liked that. So it does do some really cool things. It was sufficiently creepy. It wasn't the best thing I've read, and I think it's mainly because I felt like it was too disjointed between the two time periods. But if you're not going to be bothered by that, then I do recommend. It's sufficiently creepy and demony, and it has cool art. I also continued on with the First Law trilogy with book 2, which is Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. And I mean, Leanna from Leanna's Library had told me about this before. Obviously, we did a collab on it, and I'm continuing with the series. And these books are very thick. They're very dense. But this one was like a little different feeling than the first book of this series, because the first book was so grimdark that I was like, whoa, like it was like, I had to take breaks. And this one, I didn't have to take breaks. Like, I power read this. I could not put it down. I pretty much read it in 2 days. And it is like 600 pages. I was just going for it. I think the main difference between this book and the first book is that this one's funny. Like, the first book had jokes in it. There's jokes. But this one is just like funny for the sake of being funny. Like, and I was like, I would laugh so many times in this. And it was kind of the same gallows humor, but not the same as book 1. Because book 1, I would say the humor mainly was, isn't this the most fucked up thing you've ever seen? Oh my goodness. This one's just like, yeah, things are fucked up, but this is also like awkward. So it's more of like awkward situational humor. And I loved all of it. It's still just as like violent and crazy as book 1, but this one felt a little more heartfelt, I would say. It's less grimdark than book 1. This one kind of like had brevity. It lightened things up a little bit. It's funny. In book 1, I would say I had a different character that was my favorite. I would say in book 1, I was a big fan of Logan. And in book 2, I have to say my favorite character is now Glotka. And a lot of people love Glotka, and I didn't get it yet until I read this book. And Glotka is hilarious. Like, all of his lines in here are consistently hilariously sarcastic. And I fully get why everyone likes that character the best. I get it now. I get it. I ended up giving this 4 stars, mainly because the same criticism I had for book 1 was that, what is the plot? Like, I'm trying to review this and give you some idea what the plot is, except the fact of the matter is, I don't fucking know what it is. Like, there's so many different storylines going on all at once that are disjointed and not revolving around each other at all, that, like, it's not about one thing. It's about, like, several different things at the same time, so it doesn't really have a point. You know what I mean? It's just like a story about this world and different people in it. So it's really hard to give you, like, a plot. What is this about? I don't know. I don't know what it's about. But that's not to say it's not without direction. Like, they're definitely going forward in the multiple storylines that are happening. It was a continuation. Things do occur to forward those storylines, but it's not one storyline yet. So I'm thinking maybe in the last book, things might come together more, and you might be like, that's what it was about this whole time. Because right now we're just like chugging along with all these different plot elements and storylines that aren't related. So it's hard for me to like even try to say what this is about. That there's magic in it, and violence, and war, and funniness. It's got those. I don't know what else to tell you guys. It's hard to because it's the middle book of a series as well, but it's definitely fantasy, and it is grimdark fantasy, so it is kind of like more unsettling magic than it is like fantasy magic. Like when people start doing magic in this world, like it is unsafe and dangerous and you don't want to be around it. Like it's not pretty magic. And that's kind of the same thing for everything in the story. Nothing's like pretty and gives you a sense of hope. It's all just like, yep, another day, another fucked up thing happens. But like I said, this is funnier than book one. It definitely has like a lightness to it, and I felt this one was a little bit more hopeful. It's less grimdark than book one. I'll say that, and I enjoyed it. I liked the laughs. I don't know what it's about, but I had fun reading it. My last unsettling book was The Wicked Deep by Shea Ernshaw, and I'll be honest, I DNF'd. I got to about 40% of the way through this book, and frankly, I was just bored to tears. Like I couldn't. I read 40% of it, so that's like a good chunk of the book, and I was like, nothing is happening. I don't care about anybody. It's just like, it wasn't written, I don't know. I don't want to be mean, it's just, I don't think it's written very well, and it's just, maybe it's just me, and because I'm an adult. No, I don't think that. Okay, I'm just gonna be honest. Here you go. I don't think it was necessarily written well. I feel like it needed more editing before going to print, because there were things that just like are thrown into the story randomly. The gist of the story is that there's this small town, like a coastal town, and like 100 some years ago, they murdered these three sisters because they thought they were witches. I'm assuming they might have been witches because every year now they come back during summer and they possess girls in town, and then they use those girls to like lure boys into the ocean to drown them, to take like revenge on this town that like killed them. So I'm thinking the town maybe had the right idea because they are vengeful bitches. Anyway, cut to present day. We're following Penny, and she is, I guess, the protagonist. She doesn't really do much, and like things about her and her place in the story just keep getting thrown in randomly. I don't have a strong sense of who she is in the story. Things just keep getting thrown in. It's like, oh, by the way this, and by the way that. Oh, by the way, do you know I can see ghosts? And it's like, why wasn't this established right away? Like, it was just like a throwaway line at the end of a chapter toward the 40% mark. She's like, oh, by the way, I can see ghosts. It's like, we should have learned this early. I wasn't in the mood to figure out what Penny's deal was. I feel like a lot of things that kept getting thrown into the story randomly should have occurred right away so I would know who Penny is. Right now, she's just kind of an average teen. Like, she doesn't have anything particularly special about her. Like, she can drive a boat. Like, I don't want to be completely negative because, like, this book does have some cool things going on for it. The sisters, for example, that got murdered, sometimes you get flashback scenes. And honestly, the flashback scenes were dope. I love those scenes, and the problem is it's so, like, a minute part of the book that I was just like, why aren't we focusing on those guys? They are far more interesting. This is the more interesting story of the two. But however, excellent bits of the story, so I like that. And also, the setting in here is very vivid and distinct. It's like this coastal town, and the setting and the people and like the curse and the ocean and everything. It's all described in a really interesting, lyrical, magical way, and you kind of just feel like the sense of this coastal town. So the setting, dope. The flashbacks, excellent. It's just everything else was bad, and I don't care. I got to 40% in, and like nothing had happened. Like nothing. Nothing. And I think they were throwing this romance in, and it had like so little passion in it that I was like, why bother? Oh my gosh. No sparks. So I don't know where this was gonna go. Maybe it goes somewhere cool, but at 40% in, like nothing had happened, and I was bored to tears, and I couldn't make myself read it anymore. But it had a good setting. So it had that going for it. It's not without some merit. It just wasn't the book for me. I don't know. Let me know in a comment down below. Did you read this and love it? Did you read it and hate it? I don't know. I didn't really like look up any reviews before I read it, so I don't know. Do I have the unpopular opinion or not? Next category is romance, and I read 3 books from 3 completely different romance genres. For contemporary romance, I read The Wedding Party by Jasmine Guillory. In the end, I gave it kind of 3.25 stars. It wasn't excellent, but it wasn't bad. It just wasn't like doing it for me necessarily. I think maybe my expectations were off because I went into this book thinking it's going to be great. Everyone's saying it took The Wedding Party, which I thought was okay but overhyped, and they're saying this book is like even better. So I was like, okay, let's see what that's about. And I went in thinking, oh man, this is gonna be better than The Wedding Day. The Wedding Day I was kind of iffy about. This one I went in, I'm like, it's not better than The Wedding Day. So again, it has this cartoon cover that seems very rom-com-y, and I definitely think it's in the rom-com category because it's not necessarily a drama. It's just not very funny, and there was so much potential for funny that didn't happen. It's about Theo and Maddie. It's kind of an enemies to lovers relationship story. Basically, they don't like each other due to some misunderstanding, and then, wouldn't you know, they just can't stop doing it with each other. And then one thing leads to another, and love. So that's the basic gist of the story. And, you know, they're trying to hide it from all their friends. There are so many, like, there's so much rom-com gold to be just dug out of that basic concept. And they didn't really go into it. It was more just like 2 average people being average people. Like, I'm not reading a rom-com because I want to see normal people. You know what I mean? Like, rom-coms are supposed to be like reality but heightened. It's supposed to be like kind of unrealistic in a way. But this one is like people who are being so normal that it wasn't very exciting. Not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, because the people felt very realistic. I felt these could be real people in real life. So, talent as a writer, I feel like she has it. Like, she's built these characters that felt 3-dimensional. And that was great. It's just, it's not very exciting. So I think this might just be a matter of my own personal taste, that I tend to like books that are like silly. I don't know. I just don't like books that try too hard to be serious. I just want them to just be unabashedly what they are. Like, if this is gonna be a rom-com about 2 people who can't stop doing it with each other, like, let it be funny. This one just, it wasn't funny. And I don't even think it was trying to be funny. You know what I mean? Like, it was trying to be like what it was. So, I don't know what to feel about it. Like, it's not bad, and maybe it's just me, like maybe I'm not the target audience here, and for different romance readers, they're really, really, really gonna like it. But me personally, it wasn't exciting enough, it wasn't funny enough, and it could have been. So that's kind of wherein I feel I gave it 3.25 stars, because it's not bad, but it's not for me. And I don't know, like, props to her as a writer, because their characters felt very realistic, but they don't necessarily need to be realistic in a rom-com. So I don't know if this is a rom-com. It's like a rom-com in the very loosest sense of the word. But I guess if you like things that are a little less graphically smutty, this might be it for you. If you like a general romance with a little bit less smut, you're gonna like this. There's a lot of kind of fade to black moments here. Like, there's some smutty bits, but I've seen far more graphic stuff. So it's kind of better for people who might not want all of the smut. If you want a general romance that has a bit of spice in it, this one's probably for you. For me, it wasn't doing it. I also read At Gravesend by Jeaniene Frost. And like I mentioned before, I like books that are just unabashedly what they are. And this one screams smutty vampires. And you know what it is? It's a smutty vampire book. It's not trying to be anything it's not. And this one is so campy. And I loved it. I like books that are silly sometimes, and I just needed something campy to like break up all of the unsettling books I read, and this one was giving it to me. It's an established series. This is book 3 of it. We're following Cat and Bones, and they're both vampires. Well, Bones is a vampire, Cat is a half vampire, and they're married, and they do smutty things to each other, and I love it. Also, they hunt down bad vampires with the help of the FBI. It sounds ridiculous, am I right? But like, it doesn't try to not be ridiculous, and I appreciate the hell out of it for that. This book in particular gets into like some even campier things than that, than like Vampire Cops. It's like, oh, you know what we're gonna bring in? We're gonna bring in Cleopatra, and we're gonna bring in Dracula, and it's gonna be ridiculous. And I'm like, yes, give me all of that. So yes, you do meet some historical figures in this book, and it's just ridiculous, and it's smutty, and it's vampire action. It gives you everything you think you're going to get out of it. It's great. I read it all in one day. I couldn't put it down. It was just like a fun palate cleanser book. Super campy, super fun, action-packed, smutty vampire story. Gave me everything I thought I would get out of it, and then some. I loved it. The last book I read was The Highlander Takes a Bride by Lynsay Sands. This is another book that's not trying to be anything it's not either. It's so campy, and it's just obviously a smutty Scotland romance. That's all I wanted. It gave me everything I could have wanted. It's got like smutty delights, it's got a sassy heroine, it's got a dashing hero, it's got a murder mystery, and it's got like all of the kilt lifting I could ever desire. It had everything I wanted. I loved it. This was highly recommended to me by Mara from Books Like Whoa. She sent me a copy as well, and I was like, girl, you're right. I needed this. I didn't know how much I was going to enjoy it because I don't read a lot of like Scottish ones, and I know like Highlanders is like a whole thing. It's its own genre of romance, of historical romance in particular. And I haven't really got into it before, so I was like, I want a good like kilt lifter book. Like, what should I read? Luckily I hauled this book too, and then she sent me a copy, so I was like, oh, this is meant to be. I'm gonna read this. I need it. And I'm so happy I did. It had everything I wanted. We're following Sade, who is a sassy lady. She's got 7 brothers. She's not very good at being a proper lady. She is more like, I want to climb trees and fight and stuff. So she's like basically like sexy Merida, and I was into it. And then you have Greer, who is like a laird, and then they meet, and he's just like, hey, I like the cut of your jib, lady. And she's like, oh, really? I like yours. And then they do it a lot. All the while, they're trying to solve a murder mystery near a loch in Scotland. It has all of the Scottishness I want. It has a murder mystery. It has sassy characters doing it. It's not trying to be anything else than what it is, and I had so much fun reading it. It's so campy and delightful. I really recommend, if you just want something campy and delightful and kilty and smutty, this is it. This is it. Please read. Please. I loved it. Oh, all right. 8 books. I am a reading machine. Hopefully I'm going to get some more reading done in the second half of this month, but like I said, the holidays are coming, so I'm worried I'm going to not get a lot of reading done, but we'll see. Fingers crossed. Let me know in a comment down below, have you read any of these books, and if so, did you like them, did you hate them? Let me know if you agree or disagree. Let me know in the comments down below. Also, down below in the description box, please use the link and enter this giveaway for Imposia so you can win one of those hooded blankets. They are dope. They're basically blanket capes, and you can be a bookish superhero, and I'm obsessed. They're great. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye!